We're in Blender today, and today we're learning about how to make particle systems and using particle systems to make really cool detailed animations. So we're going to start out by just pressing A to select everything in the scene and hitting delete, which just starts us off with a blank scene. I think what we're going to use today is we're going to use a UV sphere to be the particle emitter, and we're going to go up, we're going to press G, Z, and 4 to move it 4 meters above the ground surface. So now we're going to right click and hit shade smooth, which then makes the UV sphere look a little bit more smoother, which will look better in the rendered and look more realistic. Now to add particle system, you get onto the particles section on this tab over here, select particle system, then hit the plus button, which then adds a particle system slot to whatever object you have. Now we can see it doesn't look like anything's happened until we've hit spacebar or played the animation, which the shortcut for that is spacebar. Hit play. And as you can see, particles are now coming out of the object, and as you can see in real time, we can move it and then you can do it like, it's so many different ways you can use this to make really cool animations. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to use a cube as the particles, because that just looks better than the automatic spheres you get. What we're going to do is take a cube, we're going to hit tab to go into edit mode, and what we're going to do is just hit the short keys Control and B. What this is going to do is just going to bevel the edges just to give us a little more realism. We're just going to bevel it once, just about that much, which is 0.275 meters. Click, and then tab back out of edit mode, go shade smooth. Or no, we can shade it flat, that still looks good. So this is just going to add a little bit more realism to our render. So now we're going to go back, selecting the UV sphere, go back in the particle tab. What we're going to do is take the number up to 10,000. We're also going to go rotation, enable rotation, and go randomization all the way up. And then we're going to close that panel, open up render. We want to render this as an object, and when we instance object, we want the instance object to be the cube. Now as you can see now, this is already looking a lot better because now we have 10,000 cubes that are coming out of this object, which, I mean, it already looks pretty cool. But one thing we can see is, look down here, these cubes are getting deleted at a certain time frame, and we don't want that. We want to have all the cubes we can to make this render look the best it can. So we're going to change the lifetime up here from 50 to 250 frames. Now what that's going to do is it's simply going to make it so none of the cubes get deleted, which could slow down your render a lot and your computer, because that's going to have 10,000 cubes at the end of the frame, at the end of the 250 frames. But it's also going to look a lot better for what we're going to do. So this, on one hand, looks kind of boring. Everything's just kind of just flowing nowhere, and that wouldn't look really cool, even if we go into like rendered view. As you see, I'm in Eevee. I forgot to tell you that we're going to be rendering in cycles, which is better at ray tracing, just adding to that realism. I'm rendering on an RTX 4070 GPU, which is crazy how fast it is. If you're ever looking to get a GPU, definitely go with that one. It's very good. And what we're gonna do is that's weird. What we're gonna do is we're gonna select this. We're going to animate it to make it look, to add more detail, and just so we get some more randomization where the cubes are. We're gonna move this over a little bit, so just move it down here on the Y, because we don't really need that in our scene. What we're gonna do is we're gonna hit this button down here. Right here, it's called auto keying. What that does is it lets you move an object manually without having to key every single frame. It's a lot easier just to create cool little animations quickly. So we're gonna hit the space bar to play the animation, and while we're just gonna press G and move the object around in just an interesting pattern, just to get it just interesting little shapes and stuff, just to get a cool thing in the final render. So now, as you can see, we now get this animation. Whoops, I messed that part up. 1 second, let's redo that. So we're gonna just press G, spacebar, and then G, and then what we're gonna do is just move the UV sphere in just any direction you want. It's gonna create a cool animation no matter what you do. So just keep doing that until you get to like frame 230, and then just put it back in the middle. So now we have this animation, and now we have the cubes that are coming out, which already make it a really cool render. I mean, seriously, with just this, you can make a cool render with some good lighting and with cool camera animation. It would look great just like this, but we're making something a little more detailed. Now how these cubes interact doesn't really look physically real. I mean, the gravity looks pretty good, but it just doesn't look like this to look real enough. What we want to do is just make a little more detail and add a little bit more realism to the animation. So we're in physics tab. We're going to change this from Newtonen to fluid. Now what it's going to do is going to give us a little bit of fluid physics. So as you can see, these are just like, they're just sticking together a little bit more like fluid would, and just adds to a more interesting animation. But one thing with fluid is it falls too fast for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the field weights and turn on gravity. I mean, maybe all the way. Let's see what it looks like at like 0.111. Let's see. With the less gravity, it just adds to we can just see everything better. It just looks more interesting. I'm gonna turn it down all the way. I think that's gonna look better. Let's see. Yeah, look at this. This is looking really cool. So yeah, that's gonna be really cool. It just gives us a lot of cubes to look at, and it just looks really cool. So what we're gonna do is mesh a plane. Wait, we're not in edit mode. Yeah, right. Mesh a plane. It's gonna mesh at the ground plane right here. What we're gonna do is scale it up. Push the button S and scale it up 20 times. We're gonna do that. That way we just got a good ground plane. Might want to do a little bit more later, but we'll see how this looks right now. We're gonna switch to rendered view. As you saw in cycles, my viewport settings are 1024 samples, which is I think pretty good for the viewport. Always denoise. Make sure you're using your GPU. Render, we're only going to use 250 samples, and we're also going to be denoising because there's no glass or particle. There's nothing that's going to make it that we need more than that for this render, so that's good. Another thing I always do is make sure the compositor, make sure it's set to GPU instead of CPU, which is going to speed up your render if you have a NVIDIA GPU. Also, I think what I'm doing, I'm using persistent. We're going to use motion blur. We can use motion blur, and we're also going to use no persistent data because persistent data messes up motion blur. And with that, I think that's it. I also lowered the tile size to, we're gonna do 50. That's gonna be good. And then I think that's it for the settings. So that'd be pretty good. So as you can see here, everything's too dark. To make it darker, which is what I usually do in the beginning of my scenes, is just go to the world, go to color, and make it all the way black. What this does, it just highlights stuff easier when you add an area light in. So we're gonna move the area light. I went Shift A, added an area light. If you guys couldn't see that, went GZ to move it up on the Z axis, and I'm going to scale it 5 times. That gives us a nice plane on. That's going to scale out on every axis, but I also want to scale out on the X. So do scale X, and we're going to do it 7 meters. That way we get a good wide angle. As we can see, this is not bright enough, so we're going to go down to the light data properties and change the power up to 1000 watts. As you can see, that's too much now. That one way to do this is you can just dim the light like this, but I like just doing, let's just do 100. Let's see, that looks pretty cool actually. Now, as you see, this looks kind of boring. Let's select the ground plane and just scale it up to a bigger size. That way we can't see the edges, but this is we're getting somewhere because this is it's gonna look good at the end. So one thing that we need to do is select the icosphere. We just need to get an emission texture. It doesn't have to be anything detailed. You can do it any color you want. Just give it an emission texture, set the power to, let's start it with 10 and see how that looks. I'm gonna make it blue. I think that's gonna look pretty cool. So now we can see if we play the animation. Restart, play the animation. Let's see, like right there. Look at this. We're getting these super cool blue highlights on these cubes down here. We're getting just really cool randomization, and this is already looking good. Now, one thing we can see when you just add an emission texture to an object, it's gonna look kind of flat. I mean, there's no actual like bloom or any like volumetric textures going on here. So how to fix that is, in the old version you could use Eevee and then enable bloom, but the way to get that in cycles is using compositing. Click use nodes. What we're gonna do is we're gonna move composite over. We're gonna go Shift A, hit search, and add a glare node in. Now I use these in almost every single render. Sorry about that. And we're gonna set it to fog glow, high, and we're gonna set the mix to -0.9 and the size to 9 also. So let's see here, back in layout, as you see, nothing's changed. So we go up here to the shading tab. We're gonna go down and hit always. Now what this did is, as you can see, it added this glow to it, which also slows down your render a lot because I have a slower CPU, which is i7 6700K. But this looks very good in the camera, better than, let's look at the difference. Look, disabled, super flat, but I do get better render time. Always have that great bloom on it. So I'm gonna enable camera only, and that way we only see that when we set the camera. So I mean, just simply with this animation right here, we could get a cool render, but this is not what we're gonna do for right now. So we got the whole basics down. This is gonna look pretty cool. I think it'll look great at the end. But what we're gonna do is, with that, we're going to see how our render's looking now. I mean, it's looking good. So what I want us to do is, as you can see, I don't know if we want to use the fluid physics actually. What I think we should use is not fluid. I think we might want to stick with the original one. Select this, go to particle tab. Let's go back to Newton. Let me see here. How does this look? I mean, we're just gonna get cool like immersion and like dispersion of this. I think that's gonna look pretty cool actually. Now, one thing I want to do just to add to the realism is add a force field. If you don't know what a force field is, it's a force that you add in that's not really there, that just adds to just certain things you can't simulate. So we're gonna do wind. As you can see, we have an arrow down here that has it. We're gonna go GZ, and we're just gonna rotate it on the Y axis. So we just have a little bit of wind blowing this way. I want to up the strength to, or down it actually to 0.5. And as we can see now, we got a little bit of them just flowing that way, which is gonna look pretty cool at the end. All right, so now one thing I'm gonna do, you might not be able to do this on your computer depending on how fast it is I wanna up the particles to 100,000 particles. Now that sounds like a lot, but it really is not that many. We're gonna also end the frame start to 250 frames. I think that's pretty much all that I do really for the simulation. We're also going to use the cache, which is we're going to bake it using this so we can view it better in the viewport. So we're just going to click bake. As you can see, it bakes fairly fast on my computer because I got a fairly fast CPU, GPU, and then my motherboard is pretty good. And then as you can see, we're almost done. Give it a second. And we're done now. As you can see, we're baking. Ooh, wow, that's going to look really good. So look at this. We got 100,000 cubes here. As you can see, this space up here is going to look really cool. I'm going to go with more stills actually than an animation for this because I think that's just going to look so cool at the end. So I mean, all this is just going to look really good. And one thing I actually want to do is, you can see this is looking a little too much on a 2D axis. I actually want to make it, let's go back to the first frame. I want to change this wind from blowing this way to blowing this way. I want to blow it toward the y-axis more. Wait, I can't really see how this is blowing. This way is how I want to blow it. Let's scale that up. Let's move it over here. I want everything to blow that way. So let's set the strength back to 1 and then rebake the simulation. Let's go back here, delete bake, and then rebake. So what it's going to do is just going to recalculate it. As you can see, it's going very fast as last time. I'm almost at 200 megabytes of data here, which has been baked into my RAM. So depending on how much RAM, you can go up that size of baking. So that's almost half a gigabyte, which is not that bad for a simulation. So let's see how this looks. Are we getting a little bit more depth? Yeah, we are. Everything's going that way a little bit. So that's just going to give me that extra bit of depth that I want. All right, so I think these first few frames are going to look the best. Let's look. So I think this is going to be a cool frame to do. It's like right there. So let's see how this is looking. Man, that's gonna look really cool. So as you can see, we're gonna need to have something else other than this. But let's set up our camera like right here. I think I like that. So go Control Alt Numpad 0. Oh wait, I don't have a camera in yet. So add in our camera and let's go Control. Oops, sorry about that. Control Alt Numpad 0. That's gonna automatically take the camera and put it wherever our view is. So as we can see, we got our camera lens right here. Another thing I'm going to do is press Control, then also hit the B button. This is going to add the shortcut to do rendered view. So you're going to hit it on the edge of your camera, go all the way down to the other corner. And that's going to make it so everything renders just inside the camera. So now we have rendering done. So this is rendering very fast now because you have a smaller partition. And if your computer is very slow, you can zoom out and you can still see it, but it should render faster. But at full screen, I'm rendering. Fair, that's rendered done. That's pretty good right there. So a couple things to make your scene more realistic is we're going to make it so we have depth of field. Always use depth of field. Depth of field just looks great in renders. And it just adds to that little touch of realism that we need in these renders. So what we're going to focus on is, I feel like we should focus on this section back here. Right there where my mouse is. So like, wait, let me see if I try something real quick. Tool, view, yeah, annotations, new. So what I can do is I can draw. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to focus on this area up here. Let's get out of rendered view. We want to focus on this area and make it so this area is out of view. That way we can just focus on main parts of the scenes better. And here, let me erase this real quick. Or I can just delete it, right? Yeah, all right, I deleted it. So as you can see, we're actually getting depth of field in the camera, which is a new feature with Blender. As you can see, look, these are blurred and these are focused, which is really cool that you can actually see that from the camera. So let's go back to rendered view. And as we can see, we have the same view, but as we can see, all we got is white light from here and little hints of blue light from over here. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to put some more lights in here. So I think we should just add a light. Let's just do some more area lights. So if you guys don't know, I'm using getting rid of the overlays using Shift Z Alt, which is just getting rid of the stuff so I can focus on the scene better. Shift Z Alt is what I've been using. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this area light from down here. I want to move it up a little higher, a little bit below the one above it. I want to scale it up. I want it scaled only on the Y. But we get some cross lighting, which looks good. And we're going to make this, I think making this red would look pretty cool. It would kind of mesh and it would kind of just be an interesting color just to have in there. So now look, we got these red highlights, which are already looking good. I want to up this to about 50 watts. Yeah, that's looking good. Now the other thing is we see we're just looking at the default Blender cube texture. And I don't think that's going to look very good in the render. So what we need to do is fix that texture by going back to the cube over here. We're going to hit period on the numpad to zoom into it. What we're going to do is just use this, make this texture, which will then change them for all the other ones. We're just going to make it a little bit metallic, or actually all the way up, and lower the roughness. I think that's going to look good. Let's go back to our render. And as you can see, man, look at this already. This is looking good. It's a little too metallic. I'm going to lower that down. Turn up the diffuse a little bit. I also have a little idea too. Let's try this out. So we're going to zoom down. Zoom out a little bit so this will render faster, and we're going to go into the shading tab, changing this timeline into a shader editor. Timeline back. I think a cool frame is just going to be like right there on this little curve section. And what we can do is we can have depth of field focused here, and what we can do is, or no, we can do it the other way like this. Let's see if this looks a little bit better. Let's go Control Alt numpad 0, get our camera to view there. I want to do a wide angle lens, so let's go like this, go backward. Let's make the ground reflective using metallic and lowering the roughness a little bit. Not all the way, but just like 0.5. And let's have our camera focus on the icosphere. Let's have very strong f-stop at a 0.2 is probably good. So now we get this. This is looking pretty cool. I'm liking it. One thing I don't like is the color of the cubes. I really don't like it. It just looks dark and it just doesn't look like it would fit well. So we're going to delete this texture, make a new texture. I mean, simply that looks a lot better than what we were just looking at. Now, I'm just trying to think of something that would make this look cool. I mean, we could make it a principal volume texture. I mean, that would look, we could lower the, I don't know. Let me see how that would look. No, I don't think that would look too good. We could make it glass. Glass always looks good. We could up the roughness a little bit. What if we have no roughness, and then we could just do still renders, increase the light path to full global illumination. Full global illumination. Now that's going to speed up that's going to make our render take longer. We're also going to need some more light, but that's going to look really cool in the details down here. So let's see here. Let's add another light in here. So let's take a point light, move it up on the Z, over on the Y, and we're just going to use this. Let's go to rendered view. We're going to right click, go light power, increase light power, and go light radius, increase light radius, and that's going to give us this right there. Is probably good. Let's see here. So we're getting a lot of glass, which is kind of looking weird, but I think it's still going to look good in this final render. I mean, it already looks pretty cool. So I think we should change the color of the glass. I don't really like it as blue. I think it should be a lighter color. So what about, or no, what about, this is that. Whoops, sorry about that. Let's go back to the cube and brighten it. Let's add that. Ooh, that looks pretty cool. There's a little bit of darkness up here. I think I'm going to have to increase the light balances for the, wait, which one does that? Is it transparent? Nope. Is it transmission? That's it, right? Because we've set that to 0, yeah. So for transmission, I'm going to set this to 132. That's just going to give us more realistic simulation, and I think that's just going to look better. So with this, I want to change that point light to a, let's change it to more of a orangish color, like down here. I think that's going to look good, and let's see how that looks. Now I like this, it's looking pretty cool, but I don't think that we have enough focus on these cubes to make it look interesting enough. So let's go back to our camera and let's not use the sphere. Let's use a distance. Let's use the distance of the sphere. So we can focus on distance. We click this, click on the icosphere, which is 8.2 meters, and then I also want to change the f-stop to 0.5. That's just going to give us a little bit more focus, and I think that looks pretty cool. Now this is going to be our final render. Let's use this. Let's go compositing. Let's scale these out a little bit. Not that much. Let's go like there. Let's add a lens distortion node. We want to click fit to change this distortion to 0.01 and also change the dispersion to 0.01. Now that's going to add just a little bit more realism, making it look more like chromatic aberration from the actual camera. As you can see, we can see that in our view. And also, is there anything else we could add in just to make this more interesting? Let's see. I think this actually is pretty good. This is pretty cool. So as you can see, we rendered this very quickly, and you can use this in so many different ways. We could use this to animate water, liquid, rain. It's just so cool how many different things you can do. For beginners, I mean, just learn how to use a particle system. You can make so many cool things, and I mean, this looks pretty cool to have 100,000 cubes in here. I mean, it's pretty cool. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you liked the video, and if you want anything else that's particle systems or any other tutorials, please comment, and have a good rest of your day.